In today's story, 3 states break away from the country at the very same time. And just like that, a second civil war erupts overnight. Now, this is a fictional broadcast, but I really want you to imagine that it's really happening from now until the very end. We're also on Spotify now, so if you'd rather just listen to the audio, the link is sitting in the description. But anyways, let's begin.
Good evening, and if you are just joining us, I need you to stop what you are doing and listen closely. Because in the last 40 minutes, the country you woke up in has changed in a way that has no modern precedent. At 9:02 this morning, the governments of 3 states, moving in what appears to be deliberate coordination, issued formal declarations of secession from the United States. I want to be precise about my words here, because precision is the only thing any of us have to hold on to right now. This is not a protest. This is not a walkout. 3 sitting state governments have declared that they are no longer part of the Union, and within the hour, armed formations began seizing federal facilities inside their borders. I am David Hale. Beside me is Sarah Donovan. We are going to stay with you for as long as this takes.
David, thank you, and to everyone watching, I want to say something before we go any further. If your hands are shaking, if you are sitting in your kitchen or your car or a break room somewhere and you feel like the floor has dropped out from under you, that is a normal response to an abnormal morning. You are not overreacting. We are getting messages already from families in Sacramento, from Austin, from Baton Rouge, people asking whether they should keep their children home, whether the grocery stores will open, whether the person they love who wears a uniform is safe tonight. We do not have all of those answers yet. But we are here, and we are not going anywhere, and we are going to walk through this together, hour by hour, as carefully and as honestly as we possibly can.
Let me lay out the timeline as we understand it, because understanding the sequence matters. The first declaration came out of the state capitol in California at 9:02. Almost simultaneously, within a span of roughly 90 seconds, we saw parallel declarations from Texas and from Louisiana. That near simultaneity is the single most important fact on the board right now. 3 separate state governments do not arrive at the same irreversible decision within 90 seconds of one another by coincidence. This was planned, rehearsed, and timed. We have confirmation that state National Guard units in at least 2 of those 3 states have refused federal recall orders and are now operating under the direction of their governors. That means the chain of command, the thing that has held this country together for generations, has fractured in a single morning.
And behind every one of those cold facts is a person, David. I keep thinking about the Guard members themselves. These are people who signed up to help during floods and fires, who handed out water and sandbags, and this morning they woke up and were told that the oath they swore points in 2 directions at once. We have a message here from a viewer who asked us to use only the name Robin. Robin writes, quote, "My spouse is in the Guard in San Antonio and got a call at 6 this morning and left without finishing a sentence. I do not know which side of a line my family is on now. I do not know if we are traitors or patriots. I just want the door to open again and for that face to walk back through it," end quote. Robin, we hear you. Millions of people are living inside that exact fear this morning.
We are now roughly 1 hour into this event, and I want to give you the hard numbers as they stand, with the caveat that they are preliminary and they are moving. The first confirmed casualties came from Sacramento, where federal officers guarding a building attempted to hold their position and were overwhelmed. We have 4 confirmed dead there. In Houston, a checkpoint confrontation left an additional 3 dead and an unknown number wounded. Those 7 deaths are the ones we can verify through more than one independent source. I want to stress that verification threshold because in the coming hours you are going to hear numbers thrown around that are far larger and far more frightening, and some of them will be wrong. When I give you a figure, I will tell you how confident I am in it. Right now, confirmed dead stands at 7.
7 people who had names, who had someone waiting for them, and I think it is worth pausing on that because the temptation in a morning like this is to let the scale of it turn people into statistics before the day is even over. Those 7 had breakfast. Some of them probably texted someone, "I love you," before they left. We are also seeing the first ripples in ordinary life, which is often where people feel this before the politics reaches them. Gas stations in the affected states are reporting lines stretching for blocks. Grocery stores in Dallas and in Long Beach are describing shelves emptying of bottled water and canned goods within an hour of opening. There is a message here from a viewer named Casey in Shreveport who writes, quote, "I went out for milk and the store looked like a hurricane was coming, but the sky is perfectly clear and it is 84 degrees and sunny, and that somehow makes it worse," end quote.
That detail about the weather is worth noting, because one of the strange features of a crisis like this is that it does not announce itself with storm clouds. It is a beautiful summer morning across most of the continent, and that normalcy is doing something disorienting to people. Let me turn to the federal response, because that is the axis everything else will turn on. The president has not yet addressed the nation directly. What we do have is a written statement released through the Department of Justice roughly 20 minutes ago. I am going to quote it exactly. Quote, "The actions taken this morning by certain state officials constitute open insurrection against the constitutional government of the United States. These declarations have no legal force. Federal law will be enforced. All service members are reminded that their oath is to the Constitution and not to any individual or state," end quote. That is the government drawing a line, and it is a line with no room in it for compromise.
And on the other side of that line, David, we now have a statement from the coalition of governors who signed these declarations. They released a joint address a few minutes after the federal statement, and I think people deserve to hear both, because millions of Americans are being asked, whether they want it to be or not, to decide which of these voices speaks for them. The governors wrote, quote, "We did not choose this morning lightly, and we did not choose it alone. For years our concerns were dismissed, our people were ignored, and our warnings were mocked. We are not abandoning the idea of America. We are trying to save what is left of it for the people who actually live here. We ask only to be left in peace," end quote. Two statements, two visions, and between them, ordinary families who never asked to stand on a fault line.
We are approaching the 2-hour mark, and the situation on the ground is accelerating faster than the statements coming out of any capital. Let me give you the geography, because geography is going to define the next several days. The 3 states that have declared are not contiguous. California sits on the Pacific coast. Texas and Louisiana share a border in the south. That non-contiguity matters enormously from a strategic standpoint, because it means the federal government is not facing one breakaway region, but 3 separated fronts, each with its own terrain, its own ports, and its own military installations. California alone contains naval facilities near San Diego, major air bases, and one of the largest port complexes in the hemisphere at Long Beach and Los Angeles. Control of those ports is worth more than any speech. Whoever holds them holds the flow of fuel, food, and material for the entire western seaboard.
I want to bring in a voice from the ground now, because David and I can describe the map, but we cannot feel what it is like to stand on it. We have reached Dr. Avery Whitfield, an emergency physician at a hospital in Oakland, who agreed to speak with us for a few minutes between patients. Dr. Whitfield, thank you for taking the time. I know this is not a normal shift. Can you tell us what you are seeing inside the hospital right now?
Thank you for having me. What I can tell you is that the last 2 hours have felt like nothing I trained for. We started the morning with a normal board, and then within about 90 minutes, we began receiving trauma patients from downtown, gunshot wounds, blast injuries, people caught near the federal building when things turned violent. We have called in every off-duty person we can reach. The hardest part right now is not the medicine. The medicine we know how to do. The hardest part is that the ambulances are having trouble moving because the streets are jammed with people trying to leave the city, and we do not know yet whether our supply deliveries are going to arrive tomorrow. I have enough blood on hand for today. I am worried about the day after.
Dr. Whitfield, that fear about supplies is something we are hearing echoed across every affected city. When you look at the people coming through your doors, the wounded and the frightened, what do you want the rest of the country to understand about this morning?
I want people to understand that inside this building, nobody is asking which side anyone is on. We had a federal officer and a state guard member in adjacent beds an hour ago, and my team treated them exactly the same, because that is the oath that actually matters to me. Whatever the governors and the president decide, the people bleeding on my floor are just people. I would ask everyone watching to remember that before this gets any worse. And I have to go now. They are calling me. Please, if you are near a hospital, only come if it is a true emergency. We are already past capacity.
Our thanks to Dr. Whitfield, and that plea about hospital capacity is one everyone in the affected regions should take seriously. Let me update the casualty figures because they have risen in the time we have been speaking. Confirmed dead now stands at 19 across the 3 states, with the largest single increase coming from that downtown Oakland violence Dr. Whitfield described. Wounded are far harder to count, but hospital sources suggest the number is already in the low hundreds. We are a little over 2.5 hours in. I want to explain what makes this different from previous moments of unrest this country has seen. In the past, federal authority could count on the military remaining unified. This morning, that assumption collapsed. We now have confirmation that individual units, individual bases, are making their own decisions about which orders to follow, and that is the definition of how a nation comes apart.
And that uncertainty is reaching people in the most intimate ways. We are getting a flood of messages from military families who genuinely do not know where their loved ones stand tonight or whether the people they serve alongside are now on the other side of a line that did not exist yesterday. Here is one from a viewer named Jordan in Norfolk, quote, "My child is stationed at a base that has gone quiet. No calls out, no calls in. The last message I got was 3 words, 'We are fine,' and nothing since. I keep refreshing my phone like it is a lifeline," end quote. Jordan and everyone living inside that silence tonight, please know that a quiet phone does not mean the worst. Communications are being restricted in many of these installations precisely because things are unresolved, not because they have ended badly.
That point about communications deserves expansion because we are now seeing the first signs of infrastructure strain, and infrastructure is the nervous system of a modern country. In the last 30 minutes, we have received reports of rolling power outages across parts of the Los Angeles basin and around Houston. It is not yet clear whether these are deliberate, whether they are the result of grid operators being caught between competing authorities, or whether they are simply the product of every household turning on every device at once out of fear. What I can tell you is that the electrical grid in this country is a deeply interconnected system that crosses state lines constantly. You cannot cleanly cut 3 states out of it without consequences that ripple into states that never declared anything. A family in Arizona may lose power tonight because of a decision made in a capital 2 states away.
We are hearing exactly that, David. Messages are coming in now from people in states that have not seceded, people in Phoenix and in Las Vegas and as far away as Portland, describing flickering lights and spotty phone service and asking the question that I think is on a lot of minds, which is, does this reach me too? And the honest answer is that in an interconnected country, a rupture anywhere is felt everywhere. But I also want to lift up something that is happening in the middle of all this fear because it is real and it deserves airtime. In Long Beach, we are getting reports of neighbors organizing to check on elderly residents who live alone, going door to door, making sure people have water and medication. In a morning defined by governments pulling apart, ordinary people are pulling together on their own streets.
That instinct toward local cohesion is, historically, one of the few things that softens the human cost of an event like this, so it is worth watching closely. We are now 3 hours in, and I want to give you a broader picture of how the rest of the world is responding, because this is no longer only an American story. Governments across the globe are reacting in real time. Canada has closed several of its border crossings with the affected states as a precaution, and has issued a statement urging, quote, immediate de-escalation and the protection of civilian lives, end quote. Mexico has reinforced its northern border and is preparing for the possibility of a refugee movement out of Texas. In Europe, financial markets that were open have halted trading, and in Asia, where markets had closed for the day, futures are pointing to a collapse when they reopen. The economic shock of this is going to be measured in trillions.
And while the markets convulse, David, I keep coming back to the smaller economies, the household ones, the single parent in Fresno wondering whether a paycheck will clear, the small business owner in Lafayette who just watched a morning of customers turn into a morning of empty streets. We have a message here from a viewer named Morgan in New Orleans that I think captures where a lot of people are right now. Quote, I own a little bakery in the Marigny. I opened this morning out of pure habit because I did not know what else to do with my hands. I baked 40 loaves and not one person came. so I loaded them into my car and I am driving them to the shelter that just opened at the church down the street. If we are going to fall apart, I would rather do it with my arms full of bread than empty, end quote. Morgan, that is the kind of courage that does not make headlines, and it should.
It should. Let me return to the security picture because it is developing quickly and people need to understand the trajectory. We are receiving reports of federal forces beginning to mobilize toward the borders of the affected states, though we have no confirmation yet of any large-scale movement into them. What we do have is confirmation of naval activity off the coast of California and troop concentrations reported near the borders of Texas. The strategic question that military planners on both sides are wrestling with right now is whether to attempt to reassert control quickly before the breakaway governments can consolidate, or to wait, negotiate, and avoid the catastrophic bloodshed that a rapid assault would cause. Every hour that passes makes the breakaway positions more entrenched and makes any eventual reunification harder and bloodier. Time in this situation does not heal, time hardens.
We are just past the 4-hour mark now, and I want to take a moment to speak directly to the people who are watching this alone. Not everyone has family nearby. Not everyone has someone in the next room. If you are by yourself right now, in an apartment or a hotel or a car, and this broadcast is the only voice in the room with you, I want you to know that you are not actually alone in this. There are millions of us awake and afraid together tonight, and there is a strange comfort in that shared vigil. We are getting a message from a viewer named Reese in Baton Rouge who writes, quote, I am 81 years old and I have lived through a lot, but I never thought I would see this. I am not writing because I am scared for myself. I am writing because I want the young people watching to know that people are stronger than they think and that even the longest nights end, end quote. Reese, thank you. We needed that.
We did. Let me update the numbers because I promised I would keep you current and the figures have moved again. Confirmed dead now stands at 31 across the 3 states. The rise since our last count is driven primarily by continued clashes at federal facilities in Houston and by a serious incident near a guard armory outside Los Angeles. Wounded are now estimated in the many hundreds, and I want to be clear that estimate is soft. We are 4.5 hours into an event that historians will study for a century, and the shape of it is still forming. What I can say with confidence is that the initial hope some held this morning, the hope that this might resolve peacefully within hours, is fading. Both sides have now committed themselves publicly and militarily in ways that are extraordinarily difficult to walk back.
And yet, David, I refuse to let go of the human capacity to surprise us, even now, because alongside every report of violence, we are getting reports of restraint. We have confirmed accounts of federal officers and state guard members at more than one checkpoint who, when they came face to face, chose not to fire. In Sacramento, at a barricade near the river, 2 lines of armed people who were told they were enemies stood across from each other for 20 minutes and then, according to a witness, simply lowered their weapons and let civilians pass between them. A viewer named Taylor, who says they saw it happen, writes, quote, I watched grown adults in 2 different uniforms cry at the same time and refused to be the ones who started something, end quote. That too is happening tonight. That too is America.
Those moments of restraint are strategically significant as well as morally significant because a civil conflict does not become catastrophic through governments alone. It becomes catastrophic when the individuals holding the weapons decide to use them. Every checkpoint where people lower their arms is an hour of survival purchased for the civilians nearby. We are now 5 hours in. Let me address a question we are getting repeatedly, which is what this means for the states that have not declared. 47 states remain within the Union tonight. Their governors have, for the most part, issued statements of loyalty to the federal government, though several have also called urgently for negotiation rather than force. The map of the country is being redrawn in real time, and the vast majority of it remains, for now, whole. But whole and calm are not the same thing.
They are not, and the fear is spreading well beyond the 3 states at the center of this. We are hearing from people in Chicago, in Atlanta, in Denver, cities nowhere near a declared border, and the common thread in their messages is a question that has nothing to do with troops or ports. It is, will my kids be okay? Here is a message from a viewer named Quinn in Denver. Quote, my daughter is 7 and she asked me tonight if the country is dying. I did not know what to tell her. I said the country is sick and a lot of people are working to make it better, and she asked if that was true or if I was just saying it, end quote. Quinn, I do not have a perfect answer for you, but I will say this, telling a child that people are working to make it better is not a lie. All across these cities tonight, people genuinely are.
We are moving toward the 6-hour mark, and I want to give you a sober assessment of where the infrastructure stands, because this is where the coming night will be won or lost for ordinary people. Power outages have now expanded. We have confirmed sustained blackouts affecting an estimated 2 million people across parts of California and along the Gulf Coast near Houston. Water systems, which depend on electrical pumping, are beginning to show strain in some of those same areas, and municipal authorities are urging residents to store water while they can. Cellular networks are congested to the point of near failure in the hardest hit cities, which is why so many of you are having trouble reaching family. Fuel is the next pressure point. Refineries along the Gulf Coast are among the largest in the nation, and their status tonight is uncertain.
And when the lights go out, David, the fear multiplies, because darkness does something to the human mind that daylight holds at bay. But here is what I want people in those blacked out neighborhoods to hear. You are not helpless in the dark. We are getting reports from Houston of entire apartment buildings where neighbors have gathered in ground floor lobbies with candles and flashlights and are simply sitting together, sharing food, keeping the children calm, telling stories. A viewer named Cameron writes from one of those buildings, quote, we have a man down the hall who plays guitar, and right now about 30 of us are sitting in the dark listening to him, and for a little while nobody is checking the news. It is the safest I have felt all day, end quote. Cameron, hold on to that room. That room is what survives this.
That image of a shared room in the dark is, in its way, a picture of the choice this country is facing at every scale tonight. We are now roughly 7 hours into this event, and I want to consolidate what we know as we head into the deeper hours of the night. 3 states have declared independence in a coordinated action. The federal government has declared those actions insurrection and has begun mobilizing. Military unity has fractured, with individual units choosing sides. Confirmed dead now stands at 44, with wounded in the many hundreds and both figures rising. Infrastructure, power, water, communications, and fuel is under severe and growing strain across the affected regions. The rest of the world has halted its markets and closed its borders and is watching, as we all are, to see whether this stabilizes or spirals.
44 names, David. I keep hearing you say the number, and I keep translating it into 44 kitchens where a chair will be empty. And as we cross into the 8th hour, I want to leave the people watching with something to carry into the dark part of the night. This morning, 3 governments decided they could no longer live together, but all day long, in the spaces between those governments, ordinary people have been deciding the opposite. The neighbors checking on the elderly in Long Beach, the baker driving loaves to a shelter in New Orleans, the soldiers at the river in Sacramento who refused to fire, the building in Houston sitting together by candlelight. The country's leaders chose separation this morning. Its people in 1,000 small rooms have spent all day choosing each other. We are 8 hours in, and we are staying with you.
We are staying with you, and in the hours ahead we are going to track this with the same care we have tried to bring to these first 8. I will keep the numbers honest. I will tell you what is confirmed and what is not. And when this long night turns toward morning, we will still be here at this desk. Sarah and I are not leaving. Stay with us. We are 8 hours in, and before we go any further into this night, I want to update the numbers because they have moved, and honesty about them is the only thing I have to offer you at this desk. Confirmed dead now stands at 61. That is an increase of 17 since I last reported the figure to you, and I want to be precise about where those increases have come from. The largest single jump occurred near Bakersfield, California, where a federal convoy and a state guard unit came into contact on a stretch of interstate and exchanged fire for roughly 9 minutes before commanders on both sides ordered a halt. 11 of the newly confirmed dead are from that single encounter. The remaining increases are scattered, 1 and 2 at a time, across Louisiana and the 3rd declaring state. Wounded now number well over 1,000. I give you these figures not to frighten you, but because you deserve the truth in round terms.
61, David, and I keep thinking about that word you used, contact. Commanders call it contact when two groups of human beings shoot at each other because the softer word makes it possible to keep functioning. But I want to sit with the 11 near Bakersfield for a moment because a viewer named Reese wrote to us from a hospital waiting room in that city, and I think Reese speaks for a lot of people tonight. Quote, "My brother-in-law drove an ambulance toward that highway when the call came in, and we have not heard from anyone in 3 hours, and the phones only ring and ring. I keep telling my sister he is just busy saving people. Maybe that is even true." End quote. Reese, if it is any comfort at all, the ambulance crews out there tonight are the bravest people in this country, and busy saving people is exactly what they are doing.
That courage Sarah describes is measurable, actually, in a grim way. Emergency medical services in the 3 affected states are operating at what one hospital administrator described to us as 300% of normal call volume, with roughly 1/3 of their normal staff, because so many workers cannot physically reach their stations through the checkpoints and the blackouts. Think about what that ratio means. It means every ambulance crew still running is doing the work of 9. It means paramedics who started their shift more than 14 hours ago are still out there running on nothing. Hospitals in Los Angeles, in New Orleans, and in the capital of the 3rd state have begun what they call surge protocols, which in plain language means treating people in hallways, in parking structures, and in tents erected in the last few hours. Blood banks have issued urgent appeals. And here is a number that matters as much as the casualty count: fuel. Generators at these hospitals run on diesel, and the average reserve is measured in days, not weeks.
And people are answering those blood appeals, David. That is the thing I cannot stop watching. In New Orleans, despite everything, despite the barricades and the fear, there are lines outside 2 hospitals of people waiting to give blood. Lines. In the middle of a civil war, on its first night, human beings are standing in the dark to open a vein for a stranger. A nurse named Avery sent us a message from one of those hospitals, and I want to read it in full because it deserves the whole airtime. Quote, "We ran out of the little bandages we put on after, so people are walking out pressing their own sleeves to their arms, and not one of them has complained, and an old man just told me to give his spot to the young mother behind him because, and I am quoting him, 'She has more years of giving left than I do. I have cried twice tonight, and both times it was because of kindness, not because of blood." End quote. Avery, thank you. That old man is the country too.
We are now crossing the 9-hour mark, and I want to widen the lens to the strategic picture because decisions are being made tonight that will shape whether this ends in weeks or in years. The 3 declaring states did not act at random. 2 of them share a contiguous border, which gives the secessionist coalition something a scattered rebellion never has: a defensible interior and a coastline. Control of ports matters enormously here. The port complex at Los Angeles and Long Beach is the largest in the nation, moving a substantial share of the country's imported goods. If that port stays under state control, the coalition has leverage. If federal forces retake it, the coalition is economically strangled within weeks. As of this hour, that port is contested, and the word contested is doing a great deal of work. There are reports of naval vessels repositioning off the California coast, roughly 40 miles out, though we have not independently confirmed their intent.
40 miles out. You know what is inside those 40 miles, David? Beaches where people got married, piers where families ate dinner last week, and tonight the people who live along that coast are watching the horizon because word travels even when the cell towers fail, and they know something is out there. A viewer named Morgan wrote to us from a town on that coastline, quote, "My grandmother is 90, and she remembers being told stories about wars that happened somewhere else, always somewhere else, and tonight she is sitting by the window looking at the ocean, and she said to me, 'I never thought I would live to see the water become a border,'" end quote. Morgan, tell your grandmother that a lot of us are looking at that same water tonight, and a lot of us are praying it stays just water.
The international dimension has sharpened in the last hour as well, and this is where the geography of a domestic conflict becomes a global one. Canada has closed its land border along its entire length and moved additional personnel to crossings near Washington State and near Buffalo, New York, citing the need to control the flow of people fleeing the unrest. Mexico has done the same along its northern frontier. Beyond our neighbors, the reaction has been swift and frankly unprecedented for an event on American soil. The United Nations Security Council has convened an emergency session. Several nations have issued formal calls for restraint directed at all parties, which is a diplomatic phrasing that itself is remarkable because all parties implies the world no longer sees a single legitimate American government and a rebellion, but rather a conflict among factions. That shift in language, subtle as it sounds, is one of the most consequential developments of the night.
And for the Americans abroad tonight, David, that language is not subtle at all. It is terrifying. We are hearing from citizens in London, in Tokyo, in Berlin, watching their own country on foreign television and unable to reach anyone at home. A viewer named Jordan messaged us from an airport in Frankfurt, quote, "My flight home was canceled and they will not tell us when the next one is, and the woman at the desk would not meet my eyes, and I realized she does not know if there is a home to fly me to. I have never felt so far away." End quote. Jordan, there is a home. It is having the worst night of its life, but it is there, and the people in it are thinking about you too. Distance is cruel tonight, but it is not the same as loss.
To help us understand the mechanics of what happens next, we are rejoining Dr. Whitfield, who studies the collapse and recovery of state institutions and who has been generous enough to stay with us through the night. Dr. Whitfield, we are 9 hours into this. In your assessment of historical cases, what is the single factor at this stage that most determines whether a fracture like this becomes permanent or gets reversed?
David, thank you for having me back. The single most important factor right now is not military, and it is not even political in the formal sense. It is the behavior of mid-level officials, the mayors, the police chiefs, the utility managers, the county administrators. In every case I have studied, the fate of a secession crisis in its first day was decided less by what presidents and governors declared and more by whether the person who actually runs the water treatment plant decided to keep showing up for work and for whom. When those people hold their posts and keep serving the public, regardless of which flag is flying over the Capitol, societies survive even a fracture. When they flee or take sides violently, the institutions themselves dissolve. And that dissolution is what turns a political crisis into a humanitarian one. So tonight, the most important Americans are people whose names none of us will ever know.
Dr. Whitfield, that is a striking thing to hear, that the country might rest tonight on the shoulders of a water plant manager nobody has heard of. Can I ask you something more personal? Because so many of the people writing to us are asking a version of it. They want to know how to talk to their children about this. How does a parent explain to a 7-year-old, like the one David mentioned earlier, what is happening tonight without either lying or breaking that child's sense that the world is safe?
That is the question I wish more leaders were asking, Sarah. What the research on children in crisis consistently shows is that children do not actually need the world to be safe in order to be okay. They need to believe that the adults around them are steady and that they will not be abandoned. So a parent does not need to promise a 7-year-old that nothing bad will happen, because the child can sense that promise is fragile. What the parent needs to say and to mean is something closer to, "This is a hard time, and I am scared too, and I am not going anywhere, and we are going to get through it together." Honesty paired with presence. That combination is what a child remembers decades later, not the specifics of the crisis, but whether the grown-ups stayed.
Dr. Whitfield, thank you. That is guidance I suspect a great many households needed to hear tonight, and we are grateful you stayed with us to give it. We are going to let you rest now, but we hope to draw on your expertise again before morning. As we move past the 10-hour mark, let me return to the hard architecture of the situation, because the coalition of 3 states has just done something significant. In a joint statement issued in the last 20 minutes, the three governors announced the formation of what they are calling a Provisional Coordinating Council with a stated intent to, and I am quoting the statement directly, secure the safety of our residents, maintain essential services, and negotiate the terms of a peaceful separation, end quote. The phrase peaceful separation is doing enormous work because nothing about the last 10 hours has been peaceful, and 61 confirmed dead would suggest the separation is anything but.
In David, the federal response to that statement came almost immediately, and I want to read it because the contrast is the whole story of this night. The office of the president issued this, quote, "There will be no negotiation over the dissolution of the United States. The Constitution provides no mechanism for a state to leave the Union, and the government will use all lawful means to restore order and protect every American citizen, including those living under the illegitimate authority of the declaring states," end quote. Two statements, two governments, both claiming to protect the same people. And somewhere in the space between those two paragraphs is a mother in Fresno trying to decide whether it is safe to drive her son to the hospital tonight. That is what these statements mean on the ground. They mean a mother at a window deciding.
That impossibility of the ordinary decision is spreading, and I want to quantify it because the economic dimension is becoming acute as we near 11 hours in. Banks across the country, not just in the affected states, have seen a run on cash withdrawals. ATMs in dozens of cities are empty. Grocery stores report that shelves of staple goods, bread, water, canned food, batteries, are being cleared within an hour of opening where they open at all. This is the mechanics of panic, and it obeys predictable rules. When people fear that the systems they rely on may fail, they attempt to secure resources individually, and that individual behavior, multiplied by millions, is precisely what causes the system to fail. It is a tragedy of coordination. The food exists, the country produces a surplus. But surplus means nothing if the trucks cannot move, and the panic empties the shelves faster than they can be filled.
And yet even inside that panic, David, people are finding a way to be decent, and I refuse to stop pointing to it. In a suburb outside Atlanta, a grocery store owner named Casey did something I have not been able to stop thinking about. When the crowds came and the shelves started to empty and people started to grab, Casey climbed up on a checkout counter and, according to 3 separate viewers who were there, said, "We are going to do this fairly. Everyone gets what a family needs, and nobody takes more, and I will personally make sure the elderly and the parents with babies go first." And it worked. The crowd organized itself. A viewer named Drew wrote, quote, "I went in there ready to fight strangers for formula, and I walked out having helped an old woman carry her bags to the car. One person decided we were going to be good, and somehow we listened," end quote. One person, David. It keeps coming down to one person deciding.
We are now 11 hours into this event, and the character of the night is changing, because the deepest hours of darkness are when both the danger and the exhaustion peak. Let me give you the consolidated picture. Confirmed dead now stands at 78. Wounded exceed 1,400. The increase since my last report is concentrated in 2 areas: continued sporadic fighting along the Bakersfield corridor and a separate and troubling development near the Louisiana state line, where an attempt to seize a bridge resulted in an exchange that killed 9, including, and I report this with a heavy heart, at least 2 individuals whom local authorities describe as civilians who were attempting to cross on foot. 78. I will keep saying the number plainly each time it changes, because the moment a number like this becomes background noise is the moment we have lost something we may not get back.
2 civilians on a bridge, David, on foot, which means they were walking, which means they thought walking was safer than staying, and they were carrying whatever they could carry, and they were probably heading towards someone they loved. I will not pretend to know their names, because we do not have them confirmed, and I will not turn them into a symbol. But I will say this to everyone listening who is thinking about moving through the dark tonight to reach family. Please, if you can, wait for light. Wait for a corridor that authorities have confirmed is safe. The people who love you would rather wait a frightening night to hold you tomorrow than have you take a bridge tonight. We have heard too many stories already of the shortest distances becoming the most dangerous.
that plea Sarah just made is being echoed in more formal language by an unusual source, and I want to note it because it is one of the few hopeful signs of coordination tonight. Religious leaders across multiple faiths, in a jointly signed statement released in the last hour, have called for what they term a night of sanctuary, asking that houses of worship in every city, on every side of every line, open their doors to anyone seeking shelter, food, or simply a safe place to wait until morning, without any question asked about which side that person is on. And we are getting confirmation that it is actually happening. Churches in Houston, a mosque in the third declaring state's capital, synagogues in Los Angeles, temples in the Bay Area, all reportedly opening their doors tonight. In the absence of functioning civil coordination, this may be one of the few networks still capable of operating across the fracture lines.
Because faith, whatever form it takes, has always known how to do the one thing this night requires, David, which is to keep a door open when everything says close it. A viewer named Riley wrote to us from inside one of those churches in Houston, and this one, I have to be honest, undid me a little. Quote, I am not a religious person, and I came here because it was the only building with the lights on. They have a generator, and there is a woman here in a hijab helping to spoon soup, and a man in a cowboy hat holding the door, and a teenager translating for a family that just came in. And I have spent this whole terrible day watching the country come apart on my phone, and I walked into this room and watched it come back together. Maybe this is the real country and the other thing is the nightmare. End quote. Riley, hold that thought, please. Hold it for all of us.
We are moving now past 12 hours, the exact midpoint of the first full day of this crisis. And I want to take a moment to do something I think the occasion demands, which is to simply account for where we stand at the halfway mark of this day, plainly and without adornment. 12 hours ago, before dawn, 3 states declared their independence from the United States, and a nation that many believed had grown too interconnected to fracture began in real time to fracture. In the 12 hours since, 78 people have died, more than 1,400 have been wounded. Roughly 2.5 million Americans are without power. Ports and bridges and highways have become contested ground. The military has divided against itself, and the world has closed its doors and convened its councils and begun, quietly, to speak of the United States in the past tense of its unity. That is the ledger at the midpoint. It is a terrible ledger.
It is a terrible ledger, and I am not going to soften it, David, but I have been sitting here for 12 hours reading messages from strangers, and I have to tell the people watching what those messages actually add up to, because it is not what you would expect. For every message of fear, and there are so many, there is one of these: the neighbor with the generator running an extension cord to the house with the newborn, the teenagers in Long Beach who organized themselves into a group walking elderly residents to the shelter, the truck driver stranded on the interstate who emptied a load of bottled water and handed it out for free, the nurse who gave up a break she had earned across a 14-hour shift to sit with a frightened child whose parents could not be reached. 12 hours in, the leaders have given us a war. The people have spent every one of those hours trying to give each other a way through it.
We are just past 13 hours now, and I have a development to report that carries, for the first time tonight, a genuine thread of hope. And I want to be careful not to overstate it, because false hope on a night like this is its own kind of cruelty. Multiple sources are now confirming that back-channel communications have opened between representatives of the federal government and the Provisional Council of the 3 states. Not formal negotiations. The federal statement Sarah read forecloses those, but quiet contact, reportedly facilitated by a coalition of state governors from states that have not declared, working alongside at least one former national figure acting as an intermediary. The stated and modest goal of this contact is not a political settlement tonight. It is far narrower and far more urgent. It is a humanitarian pause, an agreement, however temporary, to stop shooting long enough to move the wounded and let civilians reach safety.
A humanitarian pause. David, do you understand what those 2 words could mean to the mother in Fresno at the window, to Reese in the hospital waiting room, to the families on either side of that bridge? It means the possibility that when the sun comes up, fewer people have to make the impossible choice. It is not peace. You are right not to call it peace. But a viewer named Taylor, and I do not know if it is the same Taylor who wrote about the soldiers at the river, wrote us this just now, quote, Please tell me it is true that they are talking. My son is a Guard member, and I do not even know which side of a line he is standing on tonight, and all I want is for the shooting to stop long enough for both sides to remember they are somebody's son." End quote. Taylor, we are hearing that they are talking. We do not know if it will hold, but they are talking.
We are approaching 14 hours in, and I want to give you the sober counterweight to that hope, because a humanitarian pause is fragile and depends on something that has been in desperately short supply tonight, which is command and control. For a ceasefire to hold, orders to stand down must travel from negotiators at a table all the way down to individual armed people at hundreds of checkpoints and barricades, many of whom have unreliable communications, many of whom are exhausted, frightened, and no longer certain who they answer to. The tragedy of a fractured military is precisely that the people at the top may agree to stop, and the people at the bottom may never get the word or may not trust it when it comes. So even as we report that talks have begun, I have to report the casualty figure has risen again to 86, because in the gap between a decision to pause and its arrival at the front, people are still dying.
86, and you have named the cruelest gap of all, David, the distance between a word spoken at a table and a finger resting on a trigger 50 miles away. But I keep coming back to something Dr. Whitfield said to us earlier, that this night rests on people whose names we will never know. And it occurs to me that a ceasefire rests on them too, on some exhausted 20-year-old at a barricade outside Sacramento who, when the crackling order finally comes over a failing radio to hold fire, has to decide in one human heartbeat whether to believe it. We have already seen, at that same river, that some of them chose to lower their weapons before anyone ordered them to, so maybe, just maybe, the word coming down will meet a mercy already rising up.
That possibility that the mercy of individuals might meet the decisions of leaders somewhere in the middle is the most fragile and the most important thread we are following as we cross into the 14th hour of this day. I want to update the infrastructure picture as well, because the humanitarian pause, if it holds, will be measured not in speeches, but in whether the lights come back and the water flows. Utility crews, in an extraordinary development, have reportedly begun working under informal local truces to restore power to hospitals and water treatment facilities in some of the hardest-hit areas. In parts of Houston, power has been restored to 2 major medical centers within the last hour. It is a small thing against the scale of this night, but it is the first time in 14 hours I have been able to report a system coming back on rather than going down.
The first thing coming back on instead of going down. David, I did not realize how much I needed to hear you say that until you said it. Somewhere in Houston tonight there is a hospital where the overhead lights just came back, and I promise you in that building people wept. A nurse, maybe our Avery, maybe another, looked up when the fluorescents flickered on and knew that the ventilators were secure for a while longer, that the surgeries could continue, that the babies in the neonatal unit were safe. Casey the grocer, Avery the nurse, Riley in the church, the utility crews crossing lines in the dark to flip a switch for strangers. This is a catastrophe. I will never pretend it is not. But 14 hours in, I have never in my life had more evidence that most people, when the worst comes, quietly choose to be good.
We are staying with that fragile thread of hope, and with you as we move deeper into the second half of this first day. In the hours just ahead, we will learn whether this humanitarian pause becomes real or collapses in the gap I described, whether the lights coming back in Houston spread to New Orleans and Los Angeles or flicker out again, and whether the talking that Taylor's message begged to be true can hold long enough to matter. I will keep the ledger honest, as I promised at the start. 86 confirmed dead, more than 1,400 wounded, roughly 2.5 million without power, though that number, for the first time tonight, may be starting to fall rather than rise. Sarah and I remain exactly where we have been since before the sun came up, and we are not going anywhere. Stay with us. We are now 16 hours into this day, and I want to begin this hour the way I have tried to begin every one before it, with what we know for certain rather than what we fear. In the 2 hours since we last updated the humanitarian pause, that fragile thread has held in 3 of the 4 largest contested zones. The word came down the failing radios, and in more places than not, it was believed. Around Sacramento, around Houston, and along the river corridor outside Memphis, The shooting has largely stopped. Not everywhere, not perfectly, but the gap I described earlier tonight, the 50 miles between a decision and a trigger, has in most places been crossed by mercy rather than by another volley. The confirmed casualty figure now stands at 91. That is 5 more than 2 hours ago, and I will not soften it, but I will tell you that the rate has slowed to something I did not think we would see tonight.
91, and each one of those 5 was somebody who did not live to see whether the pause would hold, which is a grief that will belong to 5 families forever. But David, I want to sit with what you just said, that in more places than not, the order to stop was believed. Believed? Think about the trust that takes on a night when nobody knows who they answer to anymore. We have a message that came in during the last hour from a viewer named Quinn near Sacramento who wrote, quote, I have been lying on my kitchen floor since dark because the windows felt safer that way, and about an hour ago I realized I could hear crickets again, just crickets. I got up. I looked out. There were people in the street, standing, looking at each other like they had forgotten there were other people, end quote. Quinn, that is the sound of a pause becoming real, crickets and strangers remembering each other.
That image of people rediscovering one another in a quiet street is worth holding on to, because the 17th hour brings the hardest logistical test of this entire night, and its success or failure will be measured in exactly those streets. With the shooting slowed, the humanitarian corridors are now actually opening. What was a promise at 14 hours is becoming movement at 17. Convoys of ambulances and buses, many of them ordinary city transit buses commandeered for the purpose, are reportedly moving wounded and stranded civilians out of the hardest-hit districts. Outside Houston, a column of roughly 40 vehicles crossed a contested boundary about 90 minutes ago, carrying an estimated 800 people, and it crossed without a single shot fired. The colonel we spoke with earlier, through an intermediary, has confirmed that stand-down orders for these specific corridors were honored by units on both sides.
800 people, David, 800 people who an hour before that were trapped, and now they are moving towards somewhere with a roof and a doctor and water. And I keep picturing the drivers of those buses. Ordinary people who drove the number 9 route yesterday morning and tonight are steering a bus full of strangers across a line where the shooting only just stopped, trusting that the quiet will last another mile and another. That is not a soldier's courage. That is the courage of a bus driver named nobody we will ever know, doing the bravest thing of an entire life because it needed doing. We are 17 hours in, and the people carrying us through are still, overwhelmingly, the ones nobody sent.
Let me give you the wider strategic picture at 17 hours, because the humanitarian pause, real as it is in these corridors, exists inside a political situation that has not been resolved and could still come apart. The Provisional Council of the 3 states has issued a second statement in the last hour, and I want to quote it precisely rather than characterize it. Quote, "We entered this day prepared to defend our decision by any means. We have watched this night cost lives on every side of every line we drew. We remain committed to the principle of our declaration, but we are not committed to the price this night has demanded. We will extend the humanitarian pause by 12 hours, and we will send representatives to a neutral location." End quote. That last sentence, David reading it plainly, is the first time either side has agreed to be in the same room.
The first time they have agreed to be in the same room. After 16 hours of declarations and counter-declarations and a casualty count that climbed all night, someone on each side finally said, "We will sit down." I want to read what a viewer named Morgan sent when that statement broke, because Morgan said it better than I can. Quote, "I have not agreed with a single thing either government has done in months. I am angry at all of them. But I just read that they are going to sit in a room, and I am sitting here crying because my kids are asleep in the next room, and maybe they will not grow up in the country I was afraid of at dinner tonight." End quote. Morgan, a lot of us are sitting exactly where you are right now, angry and crying and hoping all at once.
We are crossing into 18 hours now, and I want to be the sober voice again for a moment, because hope and accuracy have to travel together tonight, or I have failed you. A 12-hour extension of a pause and an agreement to meet is not a settlement. The underlying dispute that drove 3 states to declare independence this morning has not changed in the slightest. The grievances are real, and they are deep, and they will not be resolved in one meeting or one night. What has changed is narrower, but not small. Both sides have looked at the cost of the alternative and flinched. That flinch is worth 91 lives, not becoming 900. But I would be lying to you if I said the sun coming up guarantees anything beyond a chance. It guarantees a chance, that is all. And a chance tonight is more than we had at noon.
A chance is more than we had at noon. I am going to hold on to that sentence, David, because you are right that nothing underneath has been solved, and I think the people watching deserve to know that we know that. But I keep thinking about all the individual human beings who bought that chance tonight without being asked to. Reese, who wrote to us from the hospital waiting room hours ago, the mother in Fresno at the window, Casey the grocer handing out food in the dark, Avery the nurse, Riley in the church, the soldiers at the river who lowered their weapons before anyone told them to, the bus drivers tonight. None of them settled the dispute, but every one of them made it a little more survivable to still be here when the settling starts.
18 hours in, the infrastructure picture is genuinely improving, and I can now report numbers moving in the right direction with some confidence. Power has been restored to an estimated 900,000 people in the last 4 hours, bringing the number without electricity down from a peak of roughly 2.5 million to something closer to 1.5 million now. Water treatment facilities in Houston and in 2 districts of Los Angeles are back online. The utility crews I mentioned earlier, crossing lines under informal truces, have been joined by others, and there are now reports of crews from states that did not declare driving in to help, treating the grid as a thing that belongs to everyone regardless of which flag flies over it. In practical terms, more hospitals have stable power tonight than at any point since the crisis began.
Crews driving in from other states, treating the grid like it belongs to everyone. David, that is the whole thing, is it not? That underneath all the lines drawn on maps tonight, the wires and the pipes and the water do not know what state they are in. A viewer named Cameron, who works on one of those crews, wrote us, quote, "We stopped asking hours ago whose side a substation is on. A hospital is a hospital. My guys have not slept and nobody has complained once. Tell people the lights are coming back. Tell them we are coming," end quote. Cameron, we are telling them. We are telling everyone watching that somewhere in the dark tonight there are exhausted crews driving toward the blackouts instead of away from them, and the lights are coming back.
We are approaching 19 hours, and I want to bring Dr. Whitfield back to us, because at the start of this long night we spoke about how societies come apart, and now, cautiously, we are watching one try to stop coming apart, and I want the sober historical view of what that actually means. Doctor Whitfield, you told us hours ago that this rests on people whose names we will never know. Tonight we have watched a humanitarian pause hold in most places, corridors open, and both sides agree to meet. From the long view of history, is this how the worst gets averted, or is this the quiet before something worse?
David, the honest answer is that it can be either, and which one it becomes will not be decided tonight. But I will tell you what history actually shows, because it is less dramatic than people expect. The wars that consume nations rarely happen because the people fighting them want them. They happen when the machinery of stopping fails, when nobody can find the brake. What you have described tonight, the back channels, the governors acting as intermediaries, the extension of the pause, that is the sound of a nation locating its brake. It does not mean the car has stopped. It means someone found the pedal. In the cases across history where catastrophe was averted, it almost always looked exactly like this: unglamorous, partial. A pause that no one fully trusted, extended by people who did not like each other, held together by ordinary human beings who simply refused to fire the next shot.
Dr. Whitfield, you have been so careful all night not to give us false comfort, so I want to ask you the human question directly, for the mother in Fresno, for Reese, for the families watching who just want to know if their children are going to be all right. When you look at everything that has happened in these 19 hours, the shooting slowing, the corridors, the agreement to meet, what do you honestly feel tonight?
Sarah, I will step out from behind the history for you. What I feel tonight is that I have watched a great many people, most of whom will never be named, choose restraint at the exact moment restraint was hardest. I have studied nights like this one for a lifetime, and I have read about most of them long after everyone involved was gone, in the cold light of the archive. This is the first time I have watched one unfold in real time and felt genuinely that the better parts of human nature were winning the argument. It is not over. The grievances are real. But if you are asking what I feel that the children asleep tonight have a better chance of an ordinary tomorrow than I would have told you they had at noon. And I did not expect to be able to say that.
Dr. Whitfield, thank you, not only for your analysis tonight, but for your steadiness across all these hours. We are now just past 20 hours into this day, and something is happening that I want to describe carefully. The confirmed casualty figure has held. For the first time since this began, in a 2-hour span, it has not risen. It remains at 91. 91 people lost, and I will grieve every one of them, but for 2 hours now, no family has been added to that list. The wounded figure has climbed to roughly 1,600, but that number reflects people being counted and treated in reopened hospitals rather than new violence. In the language of a night like this, a casualty count that stops climbing is the closest thing to good news that exists.
It held, 91, and it held. David, I have been watching that number go up all night, every 2 hours, another handful of people who did not make it, and to sit here and say it stayed the same, I did not know how much I needed that. A viewer named Drew wrote us just now, quote, I have had the radio on since this morning, then found your broadcast tonight, and I have not moved from this chair in 20 hours. I just heard you say the number held. I am an old person alone in a small house, and I said thank God out loud to an empty room, end quote. Drew, you are not alone in that empty room. There are so many of us who just said the same thing, and we heard you. We are 20 hours in, and the number held.
We are moving into the 21st hour, and the picture, while still fragile, is stabilizing in a way I can now describe with some structure. The humanitarian pause has been formally extended, as the Provisional Council said it would be. Representatives from both sides are confirmed to be en route to a neutral location, reported to be in a state that did not declare, chosen precisely because it belongs to no one's cause. International reaction has settled from alarm into something more measured. Governments in Ottawa, in London, in Tokyo, and in Mexico City, which spent the first half of this day issuing emergency statements and moving citizens, have now issued a rare joint call, not for any side to prevail, but simply for the pause to become permanent. The whole world tonight is asking for the same small thing, for the quiet to hold.
The whole world asking for the same small thing. There is something almost unbearable and almost beautiful in that, David, that people in Tokyo and Mexico City and London went to bed or woke up worried about families in Houston and Sacramento and Fresno they will never meet. I think that is the thing this night has taught me, hour by hour, that when it truly comes apart, the borders that matter least are the ones on the maps, and the borders that matter most are the ones around a hospital bed, a kitchen window, a bus full of strangers. We are 21 hours in, and the whole world is holding its breath alongside a mother in Fresno. That is not nothing. That is, maybe, everything.
We are now past 22 hours, and I want to give you the clearest accounting I can of where this day has come to rest, because you have trusted us with your attention through the darkest of it, and you deserve the whole picture as the light returns. The pause is holding. It has now held in most zones for the better part of 8 hours. The 3 states remain in their own declaration independent, and that dispute is not resolved and will occupy the days and weeks ahead. But the overnight slide into open war, the thing we genuinely feared at this hour yesterday, has stopped. It did not end in victory for anyone. It ended in exhaustion, in restraint, and in a shared and sudden horror at the cost. 91 confirmed dead. That figure has now held for 4 hours.
91, and holding for 4 hours now. David, when we started this broadcast in the dark, I do not think either of us knew if we would be reading a number in the thousands by now, and instead we are sitting here as the sky starts to gray outside, telling people that it held. I want to read one more message because it came in a few minutes ago from Reese, who so many of you have been asking about, who wrote to us from a hospital waiting room in the worst of the night. Quote, you read my message hours ago when I did not know if my family was alive. I want you to know We found each other, all of us. We are in the same room right now, and the sun is about to come up, and we are together. Thank you for staying on the air." End quote. Reese found them, all of them. They are together, and the sun is coming up.
Reese found them. Of all the things I have reported tonight, verified and cross-checked and counted, that is the one I will carry with me. We are approaching 23 hours, and I want to speak to what remains, because a night like this leaves a country changed even when the worst is averted. What remains is a nation that looked over an edge and stepped back, but saw clearly what was down there. What remains is 3 states in a disputed status that will require months of negotiation, beginning at a table that, this time yesterday, no one would sit at. What remains is 91 families who will never be whole again, and 1,600 wounded who will carry this day in their bodies. What remains also is a grid coming back online, hospitals lit, corridors open, and a pause that grows less fragile with every hour it survives.
What remains? I have been thinking about that phrase since you said it, David, because what remains is also every ordinary person who became, for one night, the thing that held it all together. The bus drivers, the utility crews who drove toward the dark, Casey the grocer, Avery the nurse, Riley in the church, Cameron on the line crew, the soldiers at the river, Quinn on the kitchen floor who got up when the crickets came back, Drew in the small house who said thank God to an empty room that was not really empty because all of us were with him, Morgan crying in the next room from sleeping children. What remains, David, is the proof written across one terrible night that when it truly counted, most people chose each other.
We are at 23 hours, and the sun is genuinely rising now over cities that spent this night in fear. Let me give you the final accounting, the honest ledger I promised at the very start when I told you I would keep it truthfully however it fell. 91 confirmed dead. That number is now believed to be final for this first day. Roughly 1,600 wounded, the great majority of whom are expected to recover. Power restored to all but about 600,000 people, down from a peak of 2.5 million, with crews working through the dawn. Water restored to the major treatment facilities, the humanitarian pause holding across all 4 major zones, representatives of both sides arriving at a neutral table within the hour. A civil war that began at midnight did not in the end become one.
A civil war that began at midnight did not in the end become one. David, I want to say that again slowly for everyone who has been awake and afraid all night. It did not become one. It came so close that we could all feel its breath, and then thousands of ordinary people in 1,000 small moments turned it away. The country is not fixed. The argument is not settled. There are 91 funerals coming that should never have had to happen. But the children are asleep, and the sun is up, and the shooting has stopped, and the people who love each other are so many of them finding their way back into the same rooms.
We are coming up now on the full 24 hours since this began, and Sarah and I have decided we will bring this broadcast to a close as the day that follows the longest night gets underway and hand off to a nation that is, against every fear we carried into the dark, still standing and still one. I want to thank you, whoever you are, wherever you have been sitting or lying awake through these hours. You did not look away, and neither did we. The negotiators are at the table as I speak. The pause holds. The lights are on in more homes than not. And the number, that terrible number I have carried all night, has stopped rising. 24 hours ago, I could not have told you any of that would be true.
24 hours. It is fully morning now, and it is quiet, and quiet is the most beautiful thing I have ever heard. If you are still with us, and I know so many of you are, I want you to do the thing that this whole long night has been about. Go find the people you love and be in the same room with them, the way Reese did, the way so many of you wrote to tell us you were doing. The country will spend a long time sorting out what happens next, and we will be here for all of it. But right now, in this first quiet morning, that work can wait a few hours. The sun is up. You are not alone. You made it through the night, and so did almost everyone you were afraid for.
From all of us, thank you for staying. The pause holds, the sun is up, and the count rests at 91 souls we will not forget. Rest now if you can. We will keep watch from here. Good night and good morning.
Good morning. Rest easy. We are all still here.